Happy New Year, everybody. It's now New Year's Day 2020. My name is Eric. The name of my YouTube channel is Eric's Eye Opener, and the objective here is to enhance our perception of the immediate environment, the global environment, and to understand history and how it's brought us into this very precarious environment we are now sitting in, okay? So let's talk about the title of this video, which is actually going to be the distinction between intelligence and the capacity for independent thought. There are great academics and great academic institutions where people walk around with great potential for data storage, but absolutely an unreasonably small capacity for independent thought. That's all by design. They are closest to this mass hypnosis that's being purveyed on the entire public, right? And that is one of the means that they actually use is academia. And controlling the narrative of everything that we believe in. And therefore establishing belief systems for all of us. This has been done to us since we were children. It's been done to our parents and our parents' parents since they were children. And that's how it works, right? So let's start with a simple expression. The tail wags the dog, okay? What does that mean? Well, that actually means that we aren't able to make our own decisions. We don't control our own life, and we're not able to harness this capacity for independent thought. So let's give you an example. We all have friends who drink too much or smoke too much or gamble. They have some sort of an addiction. And you try to get them to address it. And what do they say? Well, I've done this all my life, right? In other words, this defines who I am. I don't define who I am, and I don't control my future. My future is dictated by what I've done in the past, right? And so this is really, really important to understand because it's not just pertaining to what we've learned, but it's pertaining to the propaganda that's been we've been subjected to all of our lives. So, all right, let's talk about division here. So throughout history, a small group of people has monopolized the wealth and actually controlled the masses by means of applied psychology, all right? And so, banks and these bankers have been around since the time of Hammurabi, 1792 BC in Babylonia. We know that already they had very sophisticated economic systems because they knew how to control the masses and they knew how to monopolize the wealth, all right? So this is kind of the paradigm that we're living in. And these bankers have really assumed here 5 methods of control. One of them is very contemporary. That is the petrodollar. That was established in 1971 by Henry Kissinger and Richard Nixon. But let's talk about number 1. We just said it. It's really monopolizing, controlling the money supply. That's number 1. Number 2 is the petrodollar, right? As Kissinger said, control the oil supply and you'll control nations. Control the food supply and you'll control the people. Right? So obviously number 3 is controlling the food supply. They've been able to do that throughout history. Once you're able to control the money supply, you can control who starves to death. You can actually control the conditions around any type of environment in any country that you're actually situated in. Right? So number 4 is very important. It's what I talked about with James W. Lowen. And James W. Lowen is a sociologist and historian. He's beginning to gain some notoriety. He's been on some of these alternate media outlets like RT, and he's really, really good. He's done his research. And so he talks about the fact that our textbooks are written by centralized power, but so often endorsed by reputable historians and intellectuals, but they haven't written them, right? They just get paid to endorse them. And the idea here is that it creates a sort of a credibility with regard to what we're reading. It establishes that credibility. And so he also talks about passages that have been repeated in different books about different topics. That's very, very important to understand as well. And so, yeah, this is kind of controlling the narrative. This is what he talks about. This is what they do, and this is what's been done forever, but in different ways, right? So I'm going to give you a great example here, and I know I'm still just on the 4th one. Well, let's tell you the 5th one, just so you know. The 5th one is controlling people by having them believe that they're in a democracy. This is impossible. You can't have a ruling class and have a democracy. Of course, they control everything. They have lobbyists. All these corporations are actually able to maneuver all the politicians, all of Congress, The military-industrial complex is able to buy and sell them. It's really simple, right? So let's talk a little bit more about the historical quality of how they're able to control what we all believe. So we know that we have these billionaires like Bill Gates and George Soros, and they call them philanthropists, right? But this is very phony. They're anything but. They're here to destroy you and destroy your future. So let's talk about the father of philanthropy. That was George Peabody. George Peabody was a very mean guy. He was very mean to his family. He was mean to his employees. He was cheap with his employees. So what made this guy a philanthropist, you might ask? Of course. He gave huge sums of money to public institutions. And those public institutions were, of course, libraries, publishers, and academia, right? The idea is to control the narrative about history and about everything we actually believe. And that is how all of that is established, right? So Bill Gates has done nothing but make money since he started, as they say, giving his money away, right? And so there are three really important PR guys here. Ivy Lee, and of course we know that the banks actually instigate the wars, they fund both sides with loans, and then they generate huge amounts of capital by actually owning the multinational companies that produce the supplies for both sides in the wars, right? This is a very clever strategy. I've gone over it in detail in other videos. But you have to know that people were onto this. People were, in some ways, ahead of where we are now. And I don't know how true that is, or I'm just thinking about the people like the people that actually were founders of the Wobblies Union. And so that was a labor union back in 1905. You're talking about Emma Goldman. Emma Goldman, who actually told us if voting worked, it would be illegal, right? Just like James Hightower told us in the title of his book. Look, if the gods intended for us to vote, they would have given us candidates. And so this is all an illusion that we have a democracy. And so, look, before I even get more into this, I should establish the two societies and civilizations that influence the West the most. That is actually Greece and Rome, right? In Greece, we had great philosophers like Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle, and none of them actually believed in democracy. Two reasons for that. First of all, you have a ruling class. So the ruling class will never let the bottom level, the bottom status, rule in their interest. They'll make them believe that they are, right? And of course, these people are not competent. They're not educated enough to make good decisions in voting. As Barack Obama told us in a speech once, aristocracy should make all the decisions. We shouldn't have a democracy. And so he actually said this in public. So, I mean, it doesn't matter whether you hate Obama or hate Trump. Each subsequent president is the worst president in history. That's a fact. It makes no difference what any consensus of reputable historians tell us. This is all a sham. And they're under great institutional pressures to carry out the narratives of centralized power, right? All right, so that's, I mean, Plato had a great concept too. The Plato's Republic is a great thing everybody should read a little bit about. But let's understand the influence of Rome as well here. Now, remember, Greece was an oligarchy, Rome was a republic, as we're told. And of course, Rome was a republic in many ways, but it also was an oligarchy in many ways. So, what do we know about some of these figures from ancient Rome? Well, Juvenal was a writer from really towards the end of the 1st century AD. Juvenal was really a satirical poet who took notice of the fact that the ruling class of Rome were diverting the attention of the citizenry off the political forum and the important issues into the games in the arena, the Colosseum, and the chariot races, things like that. We saw that here. In the United States, they do it all the time. He coined a phrase, and it's called bread and circuses. And it really means basically theater in the political forum, right? So we saw it with the impeachment trials, Bill Clinton, all the atrocities that he was responsible for, yet they were creating this big public, let's call it basically a theatrical production, right? He had sex, he had oral sex in the Oval Office with a young intern. How important is this when he's invading countries like Yugoslavia and Iraq, deregulating the FCC and consolidating the media outlets to really improve the efficacy of the dissemination of this mass hypnosis? And so, yeah, I mean, Bill Clinton also was responsible for architecting the repeal of Glass-Steagall. And that was Joe Biden, really. They did this together, but Joe Biden was really the architect. Who signed off on it? Of course, Bill Clinton, right? And so this is how all these things work. So, also in ancient Rome, about 250 years earlier, born 151 BC, died 107 BC, Lucius Cassius. Lucius Cassius was a consul in ancient Rome, basically a judge, and he established or he predicated the outcome of his cases based on who he thought stood to profit. Just like Lenin said in 1917, if you want to find out who's guilty, look for who stands to gain, right? So, all right, that gives you a little bit of an idea and a little bit of insight into what really influenced us. And so we do have a ruling class. We don't have a democracy. This is simply nonsense. We talked about the 5 methods of control. That's very, very important. William Casey actually told us, he said something wonderful in 1981 as CIA director. He said, we'll know when our disinformation program is complete, when everything the American public believes is false, okay? That's what's going on. Everything you believe, especially with regard to foreign policy, is the antithesis of the truth. They create these enemies because the object of the banks is to create a 1% in all these countries after we attack them and take everything. And then the idea is that it's very methodic, right? Sure, you might say that Europe and America have done well, but this has just been an interim. Building infrastructure and really using people to create a tech age, right? This new tech age, which is really important. We know that they don't need us all anymore. We see this virus as wiping out everyone with pre-existing conditions and elderly people. We also have seen that Kamala Harris has been utilizing prison labor and in prolonging the sentences of people, keeping them in prison so that they can use them for cheap labor, right? And this is what they have in mind for the most part. So keep in mind also that Shakespeare, look, it's no surprise that Shakespeare is such an incredible literary figure and that you can actually earn a doctorate in Shakespeare now, right? All the world is a stage, and all the presidents and leaders are simply players. They're actors on that stage, and they are salespeople. They sell you policies, right? Every year, our civil liberties are hugely eroded. They produce basically all these new regulations and restrictions and laws. Most of us aren't aware of any of them. And so all this is a very pernicious dissolution of what we call our Constitution, right? It's really just about gone. So, all right, so that was William Casey. So let's talk about Michael Hayden. Michael Hayden told us that we are the best in the world at controlling other countries and their elections, right? Yet we have this nonsense of Russiagate. That, of course, Noam Chomsky said the Democratic Party, and he's left. He said the Democratic Party is a laughingstock around the world. Okay, no question about this. I mean, look, the only proof that they have is of some Facebook ads, and every country interferes in elections. Russia should interfere a lot more. We bragged about interfering in the 1996 election in Russia, and we really put Yeltsin up for a second term. He had less than a 3% approval rating because he had destroyed their economy, right? And this was all for the United States. That's what they wanted. He was a stooge for them, he was an alcoholic, allowing mineral rights and energy rights to be controlled by the United States and the oligarchs in Russia. They were both exploiting this, and the Russian people were getting nothing. Russia was almost destroyed in the 1990s through the dissolving of their economic system. And should that have happened, as Stephen F. Cohen said, they had these huge stockpiles of chemical weapons and biological weapons and, of course, atomic weapons that could have destroyed the world. So people don't realize, especially the people, I don't want to say on the left, the Democrats, that they're really responsible for nearing the destruction of the world here. I mean, and Putin has saved the world in many respects. But people just aren't educated in so many areas. It's so difficult to actually get people to understand the truth, right? So look, I usually do things in three. So that was William Casey, who said that we'll know when our disinformation program is complete, when everything the American public believes is false. We know that it was Michael Hayden, former head of the CIA and former head of the NSA, that said we are the best in the world at manipulating other countries' elections and controlling them. Now, Mike, of course, Pompeo came out and told us that the CIA lies, cheats, and steals. And that's what we're trained to do. Wow, that's really interesting, Mike. And so, who else should we hear from there? That's my three people, right? We're going to hear from an old writer called Mark Twain. It's easier to fool people than it is to convince them that they've been fooled. Okay, these are the people who design the propaganda, or actually inspire the propaganda that's really designed by think tanks, right? And they're all funded by the military-industrial complex. You're talking about Brookings Institute, Heritage Foundation, German Marshall Fund, Atlantic Council. Hudson Institute is designed to architect wars. That's what they're all about, right? And so these are the things that we believe. This is absolutely horrendous, and these are. Look, let's talk about something else here. Russiagate. We talked about how foolish it is, and it is just entirely that. It was a tool for not just it's not the Democratic Party. This is the Republican Party and the Democratic Party as one. They are one party at the core. There's no question about it. And so we also have to talk about Assad. Assad, the animal, both parties have referred to him the same. And of course, now we've had two whistleblowers come forward from the OPCW, the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, right? One of them was the lead inspector for the last gas attack, and they told us that it was staged entirely. And who's backed them up but the former director, the former head of the OPCW, Jose Bustani. But of course, Aaron Matei testified at the United Nations Security Council, and they're very dismissive of everything. They just seem to cloud it over. They seem real interested at first. And so these things are not really brought forward, right? And Putin is a dictator, and he's killing journalists. We know that Bobchenko didn't die. And of course, Ukraine confessed to staging the whole thing to bring Putin out into the open. All this is I could run through all these cases for you, and it's all false. But the idea here is that, look, I can talk about Voltaire, and Voltaire told us very clearly, those who can make you believe absurdities can get you to carry out atrocities, right? And so that is really the awful thing here. Voltaire was a great writer. Voltaire also said, this is great, Voltaire had a situation on his deathbed. The priest approached him and said, "It's time for you to renounce Satan." To which this brilliant man cleverly replied, "This is no time to be making enemies." Voltaire was intensely intelligent, and he could see what was going on, and so was Shakespeare. And again, these two parties are a design to keep us divided, so that the small group of people can monopolize the wealth and run away to the banks with it. And control the masses with this applied psychology. There's no question about that. So look, guys. This is going to be, as I said, a multi-part video. All right, we're going to talk a lot more about mind control. We're going to talk a lot more about the military. We're going to talk a lot more about the presidents and why this is only one party. There's not two parties here. There's only one. The parties that are two are the people that they have divided, right? But in Washington, they all support the same things. There's no question about it. And we're going to give you wonderful examples of that. So my name is Eric. It's now New Year's Day 2021. The name of my YouTube channel is Eric's Eye Opener. And of course, the name of this video is The Distinction Between Intelligence and the Capacity for Independent Thought. All right. Thanks so much, guys. I appreciate you listening. I hope we all enjoyed this together, and we'll talk again soon. Bye-bye.